Since the conflict between Russia and Ukraine began, numerous military experts on both sides have made forecasts that fit their narratives. But for a neutral observer, it is very important to learn the true reality of what is happening. So, in this episode, we present to you 7 possible outcomes of this intense conflict. And yes, it seems that the permanent end of American hegemony and the complete collapse of the US-led West cannot be ruled out. To learn more, watch this report.
Collapse of the US-led West? Well, you may think that it is impossible, but according to the report shared by the Center for European Policy Analysis, in the present situation, this scenario can't be ruled out. Yes, the report says that a wider European conflict, which is the worst possible outcome of this war, can collapse the US-led West. In this scenario, small fights in and around NATO frontline member nations like the Baltic states, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, and Norway are possible. Or it could even be a full-fledged transcontinental fight using conventional weapons and chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons. So what will be the outcome then? Either with a decisive defeat of Putin's Russia, the collapse of the US-led West, some sort of negotiated settlement along the lines of Yalta 1945 or possibly the 1953 Korean Armistice, or nuclear Armageddon. Outcome 2. Russia wins. The Ukrainian military opposition is thoroughly destroyed in this scenario, and a Russian puppet government is installed in Kiev. A remnant of Ukraine maintains formal independence while subscribing to Moscow's political and economic dictates and entering Russian-led organizations like the Collective Security Treaty Organization. Europe would be split into 2 armed camps once more, as it was during the Cold War. Other ex-Soviet nations would be troubled by Russia's seizure of Ukraine. Frontline NATO member nations such as Poland, Romania, and Bulgaria would face immediate security consequences, and the 3 Baltic countries would be particularly vulnerable. Outcome 3. A never-ending fight. In this scenario, the conflict would continue in its current shape for years, with successes and defeats for both sides along the way, but no clear winner, and with the prospect of further escalation looming in the future. Both nations would continue losing soldiers. Although the West would continue to assist Kiev, Ukraine's position and links to Western institutions would remain unsettled. But in this scenario, Russia can face domestic pressure, similar to what the Soviet Union experienced during its long war with Afghanistan, risking destabilization inside Russia. Outcome 4. Stalemate. This possibility would virtually maintain status quo prior to the Russian invasion in 2022. Putin declares victory, withdrawing Russian soldiers from the majority of Ukraine, but bolstering Russian positions in Crimea, the Donetsk, and Luhansk areas. Fighting would continue sporadically, as it did from 2015 to 2021. In this outcome, there's plenty of room for future confrontation. Outcome 5. A divided Ukraine. The remainder of the Donetsk and Luhansk territories are annexed by Russia, which forms a land bridge to Crimea. It may even cut Ukraine off from the Black Sea by capturing Odessa. Outcome 6. In this outcome, Russia withdraws from the majority of Ukraine, including the DNR and LNR, but keeps Crimea. A new international treaty formally recognizes Ukrainian sovereignty and formalizes agreements on critical geographical, security, and political issues. In Russia, Putin steps down, paving the door for a slightly more liberal leadership. In Belarus, President Alexander Lukashenko is ousted, and the beginnings of a young democracy arise. Outcome 7. Ukraine triumphs. According to the CEPA, in this scenario, Russia is forced to remove its soldiers from Ukraine, with the exception of the DNR and LNR, which preserves their phony independence for the time being. The report adds that, in this scenario, Ukraine gravitates towards Europe and, in time, achieves EU membership or candidate status. NATO membership remains a theoretical but distant possibility. EU and NATO influence expands not only in Ukraine, but also in other ex-Soviet republics, the Caucasus, Moldova, and even Belarus. Moscow loses influence in the Balkans in the wake of Putin's defeat, and in Central Asia, China translates its growing economic power into geopolitical heft at Russia's expense.
So yes, as we have observed, the report shared by the CEPA indicates that there are 7 possible outcomes of this war, but of course, there are Russians who think quite differently. According to many in Russia, there can only be 2 outcomes of this conflict, either a victory for Russia or a nuclear war. But we in the European Union should ask ourselves, have we really done enough to save Ukraine? We talk a big game, but how about our actions? What do you think is the most balanced and the most likely outcome of this war? Please share your thoughts in the comment section. See you again!